Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. April 11th. 2022 in Hillsborough, North Carolina. We're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 33, Text 30. Naitat samacharej jatu manasya piyanishvara vinashya chacharan madhyad Yatarud bijam visham. Not. Etad, this, samacharet, should perform, jatu, ever, manasa, with the mind, api, even, he, certainly, Anishvaraha, one who is not a controller. Vinasyati, he is destroyed. Acharan, acting. Modyat, out of foolishness. Yata, as. Arudraha, one who is not Lord Rudra. Abdijam, generated from the ocean. Visham, poison. BBT translation. One who is not a great controller should never imitate the behavior of ruling personalities, even mentally. If out of foolishness an ordinary person does imitate such behavior, he will simply destroy himself, just as a person who is not Rudra would destroy himself if he tried to drink an ocean of poison. BBT purport. Lord Shiva or Rudra once drank an ocean of poison, and the result was that an attractive blue mark appeared on his neck. But if we were to drink even a drop of such poison, we would die immediately. Just as we should not imitate this pastime of Shiva's, we should not imitate Lord Krishna's activities with the Gopis. We should clearly understand that while Lord Krishna certainly descends to demonstrate religious principles, he also descends to demonstrate that he is God and we are not. That also must be demonstrated. The Lord enjoys with his internal potency and thus attracts us to the spiritual platform. We should not try to imitate Krishna, for we will suffer severely. So the commentaries of the Acharyas don't really add much to what's there, so I'm not going to read those. I am going to read from Krishna book. One may argue that since Krishna is the supreme authority, his activities should be followed. In answer to this question, Sukadeva Goswami has very clearly said that Ishwaram, the supreme controller, may sometimes violate his instructions, but this is only possible for the controller himself, not for the followers. Unusual and uncommon activities by the controller can never be imitated. Sukadeva Goswami warned that the conditioned followers who are not actually in control should never even imagine imitating the uncommon activities of the controller. A Mayavadi philosopher may falsely claim to be God or Krishna, but he cannot actually act like Krishna. He can persuade his followers to falsely imitate rasa dance, but he is unable to lift Govardhan Hill. This is something Prabhupada would say often. You know, you can say you're going to imitate the rasa dance and run off with somebody else's wife, but you can't lift Govardhan Hill. We have many experiences in the past of Mayavadi rascals deluding their followers by posing themselves as Krishna in order to enjoy Rasa Lila. In many instances, they were checked by the government, arrested, and punished. So Prabhupada's going to give a specific example But although he's giving an example from India at the time of Bhakti Vinod, this kind of behavior is common in every religion, isn't it? That some religious leader, in the name of religion, gets involved with illicit activities. Usually it's a man getting involved in illicit activities with women. And there are certainly instances of where men get involved with illicit activities with other men's wives. In fact, sometimes there's whole cults where the leader, yes, you've all heard of this kind of thing in the news, where the leader, makes sure that he has a sexual relationship with all the men's wives and like this. So Prabhupada's about to give an example from the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. In Orissa, Thakur Bhaktivinoda also punished a so-called incarnation of Vishnu who was imitating Rasa Leela with young girls. There were many complaints against him. At that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was magistrate, and the government deputed him to deal with that rascal, and he, you okay? And he punished him very severely. The Rasa Leela dance cannot be imitated by anyone. Shukadev Goswami warns that one should not even think of imitating it. He specifically mentions that if, out of foolishness, one tries to imitate Krishna's rasa dance, he will be killed, just like a person who wants to imitate Lord Shiva's drinking of an ocean of poison. Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison, but kept it within his throat. The poison made his throat turn blue, and therefore Lord Shiva is called Nilakanta. But if any ordinary person tries to imitate Lord Shiva by drinking poison or smoking ganja, he is sure to be vanquished and will die within a very short time. Lord Sri Krishna's dealings with the gopis was under special circumstances. So now Prabhupada is going to describe those circumstances. Most of the gopis in their previous lives were great sages, expert in the study of the Vedas, and when Lord Krishna appeared as Lord Ramachandra, they wanted to enjoy with him. Lord Ramachandra gave them the benediction that their desires would be fulfilled when he would appear as Krishna. Therefore, the desire of the gopis to enjoy the appearance of Lord Krishna was long cherished. So Lord Ramachandra appeared in Treta Yuga, but not Treta Yuga of this Yuga cycle, Treta Yuga of another Yuga cycle. So it was about 14 million years, long cherished. Yeah. So they approached Goddess Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband. There are many other circumstances also which testify to the supreme authority of Krishna and show that he is not bound to the rules and regulations of the material world. In special cases, he acts as he likes to favor his devotees. This is only possible for him because he is the supreme controller. People, and this is now probably segueing to tomorrow's verse, people in general should follow the instructions of Lord Krishna as given in the Bhagavad Gita and should not even imagine imitating Lord Krishna in the rasa dance. Very interesting purport for tomorrow's, very interesting commentary by our acharyas actually for tomorrow's verse about when you shouldn't even follow the instructions of the great person. Naitat sama charejjatu manas yapi yanishvara vinash yat yat charan modyad yatarudro bijam visham. One who is not a great controller should never imitate the behavior of ruling personalities, even mentally. If out of foolishness an ordinary person does imitate such behavior, he will simply destroy himself, just as a person who is not Rudra would destroy himself if he tried to drink an ocean of poison. So this is the do not try this at home. You've all seen that, right? There's some science show. We used to show a lot of science shows to our Gurukul kids. So the person in the video, they're doing some science experiment, and they may say, "Do not try this at home." Yes? You've all seen that? Or there's an automobile advertisement, and they'll have a little notice, "This is on a closed course by a professional. Do not attempt." Right? Even the big Hollywood actors don't usually do their own stunts. Some of them, but most of them don't. Most of them have a stunt person who has a similar size and shape of body, and the expert is doing the crazy stunts, jumping from helicopters or whatever they're doing, and the actor is not doing that. And even most of the stunts that one sees, They're not even real. A lot of them are done, what is it called, CGI, and a lot of them are not real. It looks like, I mean, could you imagine if they were all real? You know, the cities of the world would all be burned down and bombed out. And so you may look at this and say, oh, I'm going to try that, but you can't. You know, and this is true even in ordinary life. There are different dharmas according to different capacities. What's the right thing for one person to do is the wrong thing for another person to do. And this is true on a material level. It's also true, interestingly enough, on a spiritual level. Even on a spiritual level. There are certain things that some people can do that are good for them, that are beneficial for them, that are going to be harmful for a person on another level. And then there are certain dharmas that are universal, certain things that everybody can do, that everybody can benefit from. So this first point about how that even materially, something that's good for John may be bad for Sam, is the basis of the concept of varnashram. I mean, if you think about it, and I've been thinking about it a lot over the last 5 years, why is it that Krishna has taken the hundreds of thousands of possible careers and divided them into 4? What's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of saying, well, all these careers we're going to designate as Brahmana, and these careers we're going to designate as Kshatriya, and these careers we're going to designate as Vaishya, and these careers we're going to designate as Sudra? What good does that do? In fact, the Prabhupada even has a statement in Nectar Devotion. You don't have to designate yourself like that. Whatever work you do, do it for the pleasure of Krishna. But there must be a reason. And we find the reference to Varna Dharma is throughout the Bhagavatam. It's also one of the main themes of the Bhagavad Gita, that Arjuna, you should do your duty. And in Krishna book, when Prabhupada's talking about tomorrow's verse, about following instructions, what instructions we should follow, he starts talking about doing our duty in Varnashram. So the reason why all careers have been divided into 4 is because what's dharma in one of those is adharma in another one of those. So if you're going to say, well, I'm going to use my work, I'm going to use my life for God, the way you're going to use your life for God, the way you're going to use your life where your occupation becomes as good as bhakti, depends on which of those 4 categories you're in. It will change what your dharma is. We were giving a class to the iFast devotees on Saturday, and we had the typical questions where people were saying, well, how do I spiritualize my life that's not direct devotional service? You know, we make this often dichotomy, that chanting my rounds is bhakti and working at the bank isn't bhakti. But the idea of Varna Dharma is that whatever you do, yad karoshi, yad ignashi, yad tahosti jadasi, yad tapasya sikanta, yad tat kurushva madarpanam, whatever you do can be as good as bhakti. Srila Prabhupada gives the analogy of an iron rod in the fire, which probably doesn't make much sense to most of us because we don't see blacksmiths very much. But if, you know, we all eat and most of us cook. So if you put a pot on the stove, the pot gets as hot as the fire, yeah? You touch the fire, you touch the pot, you will get equally burned. So when our ordinary activities are used in bhakti, they can become like a hot pot, with bhakti being the fire. But how they get used in bhakti is very different. For example, a brahmana is supposed to be very forgiving, yes? Now, kshatriyas can also be forgiving. Prahlad Maharaj tells Bali, when you're the king, don't punish everybody. You have to forgive some people. But kshatriyas also have to be into punishing. Brahmanas don't usually punish, sometimes, but it's very unusual. Just like we had in the Ramayana, how Vishvamrita didn't want to punish the demons. He asked Dasarath, I want Ram to punish the demons. Yes, you all remember this? Why? Because that's not the business of the Brahmanas. They can do it. Actually, they can do it better than the Kshatriyas. Much better. As we were talking about yesterday, Vasistha had far better weapons than Vishvamrita when Vishvamrita was a Kshatriya. But they don't do it. Their mood is forgiveness. Yeah? And therefore, if you have a Brahmana running the government, they forgive criminals easily. It's a problem. It's actually a problem when you have Brahmanas managing like villages. They don't mete out punishment properly. They're not really into justice. It's not their thing. And Kshatriyas have to act very quickly. They have to make split-second decisions. Whereas Brahmanas like to take a long time to research and think about things. So if you have someone with a Kshatriya nature acting as a Brahmana, they won't research properly. Huh? So the dharma of a Kshatriya is in the fog of war. That Kshatriya has to make split-second decisions with very little information. That's their dharma. But for a Brahmana, that would be a dharma. Does this make sense to everybody? And the Vaishya has to make a profit. That's their dharma. If the Vaishya doesn't make a profit, their business will fail. And if their business fails, the world doesn't eat. The world doesn't get clothes. The world doesn't get medicine. The Vaishya has to think about putting on their own oxygen mask first. They have to make sure they're making a profit first for themselves. Or they can't serve the society. But that's not the mood of the Kshatriyas. The Kshatriya's mood is charity. The Kshatriyas store grain for distribution. And they're interested in social welfare. And if the Kshatriya tries to run a business, they usually pour all the profits into helping poor people somewhere. You see this sometimes. Businesses, we give all of our profits to helping, poor people in the Sudan or something. And then the business fails. At some point, as the business starts to become successful, you usually find that they sell it to a Vaishya. Now, if a Kshatriya is profit-minded, they ruin the country. Does this make sense to everybody? If somebody in government is thinking, I want to profit for myself, I want to profit out of the government, I want to get something, we have this emollient clause in the Constitution, that the government cannot enrich themselves by working in government. It destroys everything. But if a Vaishya doesn't enrich themselves, it destroys everything. What's dharma in one place becomes adharma in another place. Or the Shudra really takes beauty in their craftsmanship. Whether they're a plumber, whether they're a sculptor, whether they're an acrobat, their meditation is on the beauty of their craft. And the Shudra is very satisfied. If the Shudra gets basic creature comforts, they're satisfied. They're not interested in fame. But the Vaishya, again, is expansive. The Vaishya wants to make profit. The Vaishya is interested in quantity. And when the Vaishya does Shudra work, they automate it. They make it into a factory. They degrade the craft. And if a Shudra tries to do Vaishya work, again, they don't care about the profit. And often the business fails. I mean, a Shudra can do a small business. They can sell their jam at the flea market, and they have their little craft business just to maintain itself. But if they try to get into big business, they don't have the heart for it. If a Brahmana tries to do Vaishya work, they think making a profit is dirty. They just can't even get into it. And if a Vaishya tries to do Brahminical work, they'll think, why are they studying pure mathematics? What a waste of time. So what's dharma for one person is adharma for another person. Therefore, Krishna says, don't do someone else's work even if you think you can do it perfectly. Don't do work that's against your nature, because that dharma matches our nature. We have a particular nature from the impressions we've gotten in this life and in our previous lives, and the way that we live should match our nature. The dharma matches who we are. And when we're working according to our nature, we feel enlivened. We feel alive. We feel enthused. And it's what we will do automatically, as Krishna says. So this principle, don't imitate someone else's dharma, even if you think you can do it well, applies even in the material sphere. Heart Muscle cells should be in the heart, not in the lungs. Lung cells should be in the lungs, not in the stomach. Skin cells should be in the skin. We have a place in the universal body, and when we're in that place, we feel very, very, very satisfied. Now, this principle also applies spiritually. It applies spiritually even to the Nitya Siddha devotees. There are different relationships that the devotees have with Krishna. Right? We talk about how there's 5 main relationships: neutrality, servitorship, friendship, parental, conjugal. And Rupa Goswami devotes a whole wave of the northern ocean of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to what happens if you mix these things improperly. There's ways you can mix them that are okay, and ways you can mix them that aren't okay. Just like he says, you can't mix parental with conjugal even slightly, or the whole thing becomes distasteful. And we experience that in this world also, right? That mixture, if you've got a parental relationship with someone and there's even a tiny tinge of sexuality, the whole thing is spoiled. But he gives a detailed explanation what doesn't mix with what. Also among the 7 secondary rasas: fear, chivalry, anger, wonder, etc. Like fear and chivalry, they don't go together. Right? How are you going to be a chivalrous hero if you're full of fear? It just doesn't work. And laughter and lamentation don't go together either. Usually laughter and disgust don't go together, but sometimes there might be a comic player who has a disgusting costume that you're laughing at. So there's things that don't mix, and Rupa Goswami says if you mix them improperly, your taste becomes a shadow of a taste. And again, we've all experienced this. We're with our friends, we're having a good time, and someone introduces something that's unpalatable. They say something that doesn't fit with the relationship. They do something that doesn't fit with the relationship, and immediately your happiness in the relationship becomes funny, becomes yucky. Yes, everybody's experiences? There's some relationship you have with somebody in some level, and somebody says something or does something, and all of a sudden the whole mood is spoiled. Yeah? So what's the proper mood for one isn't the proper mood for another. One example given of Krishna's servant, Patri. So he's near Krishna and the cowherd boys, and the cowherd boys start joking and laughing in a very equal way. And Patri starts to laugh with them, and then immediately he feels yucky. He feels, I'm a servant. I'm subordinate. I don't want to laugh with Krishna as an equal. This is disturbing my relationship with Krishna. And he pulls back. So what's dharma for the cowherd boys, pushing Krishna around, shoving him, wrestling with him, saying, you didn't lift Govardhan Hill. That was just Madhu Mangal's mantras. That's the dharma for the cowherd boys. But for the servant, their dharma is, all glories to you, my Lord, the lifter of Govardhan Hill. What's right for one isn't right for the other. What's dharma for one isn't dharma for the other. And a similar thing applies to those who are practicing Krishna consciousness, although this is a little different. Because in one's eternal relationship, it's eternally like that. Right? If you're in a parental role with Krishna, you're certainly serving Krishna, but you're serving Krishna as a superior, not as a subordinate. And the mood of being subordinate to Krishna it doesn't fit with your with your parental mood. And that's true eternally if you're in that mood of being Krishna's parent. But as a sadhaka, our dharma changes as we progress in Krishna consciousness. And this is nicely explained by Bhaktivinoda in his book Bhakti Loka in the section on niyamagraha. Now, niyamagraha can mean you're either not following the rules, like a sahajiya, or you're following the rules just mechanically. You think bhakti is a mechanical process. So he explains niyamagraha that there are, as we're practicing Krishna consciousness before we've attained perfection, the rules change as you progress. So what the rules are for a very new devotee is not going to be exactly the same rules as there are for a more advanced devotee. And he says it's very important that when you're ready to take the next step, you take the next step. And you don't hold on to the rules of the previous step. Now, we could compare this to, say, we talked about varnas. We could compare this materially to ashrams. So someone in the brahmachari ashram is generally expected to progress and go to the grihastha ashram. And someone in the grihastha ashram is expected to generally progress and go to the vanaprastha ashram. And the rules change. Right? We have difficulty in ISKCON when someone stays in the brahmachari ashram so long, way past their expiration date. Right? And then they go into the grihastha ashram and they're still trying to act like a brahmachari and they fry their poor wife. Right? Or sometimes the woman's there in the brahmacharini ashram for too long and fries her poor husband. And we've seen this. Right? Or if somebody enters into the renounced ashram and they still act like they're a grihastha. It's unpalatable. So as we progress in bhakti, the rules change. Like, I would not suggest that people who newly come to Krishna consciousness read the Leela works of our acharyas. If you haven't yet read Srila Prabhupada's books, you haven't been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time, then that's not a very good idea. You become confused. Right? I mean, one of the difficulties now is that we have all these English and many other language translations of these books of very intimate Leela that are widely available. And so somebody, chanting Hare Krishna for 1 week, not knowing anything about Krishna consciousness, is reading the Govinda Lilamrita and the Gita Govinda and becoming bewildered. First read Krishna book, first read Bhagavad Gita. But like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said in Radhakund, he said, after 15 years, you should be able to read these books. And so the rules change. And if somebody says, well, I'm already chanting Hare Krishna for 40 years, but I can't read Biya Bhagavatamrita, then that's going to be a hindrance for their progression. Does this make sense to everybody? Or in the beginning, maybe you don't know what you want to do in Krishna consciousness, and you're trying this and you're trying that. But after some time, you get some sense with the guidance of your spiritual master, the guidance of senior devotees, what is the best service you can offer for the Krishna consciousness movement. And if you say, well, I should just still be a jack of all trades, no, that's not your best use for the movement. But if somebody comes and on day one they say, well, I can't do this, I can only do that. So that's not going to be very favorable. So these things change. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if we don't progress, if we just stick to the rules of the previous stage, then those rules act as chains around our feet and keep us from progressing. I remember a talk by Hridayananda Maharaj where he was saying, it's called the Hare Krishna movement. You have to be moving. You have to be progressing. And this is the reason why Rupa Goswami is describing Shraddha Prema. This is why Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has his whole Madhurya Kadambini, expanding on Shraddha Prema. What's the purpose for that? Now, not that we spend all of our life deciding intellectually where I am, but we should have some general idea of where we are. If we think another material example, if I'm going to drive from here to Raleigh, so my directions keep changing depending on my location, right? Whether I turn left, right, or go straight depends on where I am. And I can't say, well, when I went out the driveway, I turned right, and therefore I should keep turning right over and over again. Yeah? And if you want to give somebody directions to a place, first you have to know their location. So if I want to know how to progress in Krishna consciousness, I have to know where I am. And as we're advising people in Krishna consciousness, we advise them differently according to their level of faith and according to their level of realization. And if we don't do that, we're committing one of the offenses on chanting. If we advise someone above their level of realization. But it's also wrong to advise someone below their level of realization. I had a very kind of intense experience many years ago where I was wasting my human form of life arguing with somebody about whether or not Varnashram and Bhakti are exactly the same. And as I said, Varnashram can be Bhaktiized. But Varnashram in and of itself is not Bhakti. So anyway, this devotee was arguing with me with great enthusiasm that Varnashram is Bhakti. And I was arguing for some time, and having been trained in debate, I'm pretty good at defeating people in argument. Even if I have the wrong side, I was trained like that. So I was able, I had come within 1 millimeter of convincing this person, and immediately I got this strong feeling, stop right now. If you get this person off the platform of Varnashram, I can understand. They'll just go to sinful life. They're not going to go up. They're going to go down. And so I stopped. And I'm like, okay, just leave you alone. Sometimes you have to let people be at the platform that they are and give them instructions for the platform of they are, not the platform that you are on, or not the platform you think that they should be or they could be. Does this make sense to everybody? You know, even if it's something that we might think this person would benefit from it, if we try to instruct them in that way and we get strong resistance, best to like say, okay, let me instruct them on a different platform. They're not ready for this. They're not open for it. And if we try to push something on somebody that they're not open for, it can actually push them to a lower level. But conversely, if we fail to give higher instructions to someone who is ready for it, then we also do them an injustice. If someone is ready to go on for something else, no, stay at a lower level. Stay at a lower level. So this is also violence. But there are universal, eternal, transcontextual dharmas. There are dharmas that everybody can do at any time and any place, ever. They're suitable for anyone. They're actually even suitable for the lower than human beings. They're always true. I am a soul. There is a God. My duty is to love him. That's always true. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how advanced you are. It doesn't matter how fallen you are. It doesn't matter what role you're playing in the world, whether you're fitting the plumbing pipes or whether you're writing a thesis on pure mathematics. It doesn't matter. That always applies. That's always the right thing to do. I am a spiritual being. There is a God, and my duty is to love him. And therefore my duty is to love all living entities and to try to help myself and others come closer to loving God. That we're never in danger there. Other things, materially and even spiritually, we have to consider that personalism means somebody else can do something and I better not try it at home. I'll die. You know, somebody else can be a trapeze artist flying through the air with the greatest of ease. And, you know, if I can stand up from a squat without using my hands, it's a good day. But we can always try to love God. And people ask, how can I please God in this situation? How can I serve Krishna? You can have love. Find where Krishna is there and act out of love for him. That's true whether you're chanting your rounds. It's true whether you're driving your car. It's true whether you're working in the bank, whether you're changing a diaper, whether you're sick in bed with the high fever, whether you're a trapeze artist. It doesn't matter. It's even true if you're an animal. Even the animals can hear the holy name. Even the animals can take some prasadam. We can even deal with the animals with some love. Even animals can feel some love because they're a soul. So that's always true. But otherwise, we should know our position and act accordingly. So questions, comments, additions, subtractions, chastisements. Yes, Gopi. Mm. Right. Yes. I think that's a very deep and insightful realization. I like to say that if you want to know how to please Krishna in any circumstance, look at Bhagavad Gita 12:13 through 20, which starts out, one who is not envious but is a kind friend to all living entities. You know, the analogy I like to give is that you pretend that you're kind of a secret agent. You know, like if you go to North Korea as a spy, you don't tell the people in immigration, "Hi, I'm a spy." Right? You pretend to be something else, an English teacher or whatever, right? Car salesman. And superficially, you're an English teacher or a car salesman, but actually you're a spy for your government. So we appear to have so many roles in this world. We appear to be, you know, all of us are someone's son or daughter. We may be a wife or a husband. We may be a mother or father. You know, we may be a bank teller. We may be a car salesman. We may be whatever role we have in this world. But that's just our cover story. You know, that's not our identity. My identity is not, I'm this person's mother, father, son, daughter, and I'm a banker. That's not my identity. My identity is Jivara Swabhaya Krishnara Nityadasa. And whose company do I really work for? I really work for Krishna's company. And what's the product that Krishna's selling? Love of God, Krishna Prema. That's the company product. Right? And then everyone else I work with, some of them are my supervisors in the company. Some of them are my co-workers. Some of them are my customers. Some of them are potential customers. Right now they're shopping at the Illusion Mall. And everyone I deal with is in one of those categories. They're a supervisor, they're a co-worker, they're a customer, or they're a potential customer in the Love of God company. And it may appear superficially that I'm something else, but that's really what I'm doing. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam.